Welcome to the Chase Challenge Week 6. It's a pivotal week because we are almost 1/8 of the way through the entire reading of the Bible in 1 year. Now, last week, God introduced himself to Moses. But this week, Moses is going to introduce God to Pharaoh. But Pharaoh's response will kind of be the foundation of the entire week's reading. Pharaoh says to Moses, "Who is God that I should obey him, that I should do what he said?" Maybe that's the question that you're asking yourself. Who is God that I should obey him, that I should spend all of this time reading his word and try to get through the entire Bible in 1 year? Who is God that I should chase after him with the intensity that he is chasing after me? We will see in this week's reading God making himself known to Pharaoh. Pharaoh doesn't know God, but God wants Pharaoh to know him. But he not only wants Pharaoh to know who he is, God wants the Egyptian people to know who he is. He doesn't only want the Egyptian people to know who he is, he wants the Israelites to know who he is. And he wants the lands surrounding Egypt to know who he is. And he wants the people who live in the land that God has promised to the Israelites and to their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He wants the people that live in those lands to know who he is too. Now, last week, God made it clear to the Israelites that he saw their suffering. He saw their injustice. He knew what was happening to them. He also told them that he heard their cries. He heard their cries for help and their prayers, even when they felt like God was silent and God wasn't listening. God told them, I heard your prayers. I hear your prayers. He also told them, I am able to rescue you. I am able to save you from your slavery, to rescue you from your slavery and bring you to this purpose that I have for you, this land that I prepared for you. And for over 400 years, you've been waiting for this promised land. I'm able to rescue you out of the situation that you're in and bring you to this place of amazing blessing. And God saw them, he heard them, and he's able to do this. But the question is, can they trust him? Who is God that they should trust that he will do what he's saying that he's going to do? Who is God that they should follow everything that he says to do? And is he really able to do it? Is he capable of keeping his promises? Is he capable of being and doing everything that he has promised to be and do? Everything in this week's narrative points to God making himself known to the Israelites, to their descendants, to generations after them, to the Egyptians, to the surrounding lands, to the people of the promised lands. All of these people, after this week's reading, they will know God's power. They will know his might, because maybe the Israelites just want to get from point A to point B. Maybe they just want to get out of slavery and to this promised land that is so wonderful and so full of blessings, so filled with milk and honey, this amazing promised land. They just want to get from point A to point B, but God has a bigger goal. God wants them to know him. And it's not just about getting from point A to point B. It's about knowing God. And not just about them knowing God, but the whole world knowing him. So God, in this week's reading, brings the Israelites through this series of impossible situations where the Israelites feel totally hopeless and helpless. And there's nothing that they can do. They're like just, there's these series of brick walls that they come up against. But God shows up and he shows off so that the Israelites might know him, so that the Egyptians might know him, so that the people living in the lands that they're going to might know who he is. That's his ultimate goal. And that's his ultimate goal for me and you, that we might know him. And my prayer for you today and me is, God, do whatever it takes to help us to know you. May we know you. Now, there's a couple of questions I want you to ask yourself in this week's reading. When the Israelites find themselves in these helpless and hopeless situations, how do they respond? How do they respond to their helplessness and hopelessness? How do you respond when you feel helpless and hopeless? My second question is, what does God do every single time? Every single time the Israelites are in a situation where they're helpless and hopeless, what does God do? Number 3, the Israelites will face their first battle. After they leave Egypt, they will be attacked by the Amalekites. Who is the leader of the army? Who is the leader of this battle? What is his name? We already know that Moses feels very inadequate as a leader, very unworthy to take on this task that God has given to him. It's enormous because this group of 70 people, this family of 70 who had moved to Egypt, had grown into a huge group of people. The Bible tells us over 600,000 fighting men, plus women and children. So over 1 million people. They had grown into over 1 million people while they were slaves in Egypt. Moses is trying to lead 1 million people. What does God give to Moses to help him in his leadership, to help him grow this huge group of people into a nation? The first thing God gives to Moses is through the advice of his father-in-law. His father-in-law is named Jethro. Jethro gives Moses some really good advice about leadership. What advice does Jethro give to Moses? Then, 2 chapters later, God gives directly to Moses something that will be immensely helpful for him as he leads this nation and as he tries to govern the people. What does God give Moses to help him lead the nation of Israel? My last question is related to the last part of this week's reading. God makes it very clear that not only does he want Moses, the Israelites, really all people to know him, he wants to meet with them. He wants to dwell among them. That's his desire, to dwell among his people, to meet with them and to speak with them. What does he tell Moses to do to help make this possible? Because how can a holy, righteous, mighty, powerful, divine God, how can they connect? How can they have an intimate, personal relationship with this mighty, awesome, powerful God? What does God tell Moses to do in an effort to make this happen? There's just a couple of things I want you to keep in mind as you're reading this week. Number 1, remember that the term Israelite is synonymous with Hebrew. The Israelites were Hebrew people. They spoke the Hebrew language, and they were all descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Number 2, as they're coming out of Egypt, remember that they are nomadic people. They don't have any permanent dwelling place right now. They're moving from spot to spot to spot. So they're living in tents They're putting things up, taking them down, and they're moving to the next location. There are no prisons. There are no hospitals. There is no modern science. So read this week through the eyes of an ancient Hebrew, an ancient Israelite. Take off the glasses of 21st century America. Please take off those lenses and read this week as if you are an Israelite. You are a Hebrew slave coming out of slavery, trying to learn how to live free and trying to learn who God is, if you should trust him, and what it will take to have a relationship with him. These next few weeks are very, very foundational for the rest of the Bible, including the New Testament. You know, there's a book in the New Testament called the Book of Hebrews. And delving into this and really looking at this week's reading, next week's reading, some weeks to follow through the eyes of a Hebrew will help you understand the New Testament book of Hebrews. I hope you found this video helpful. I really would love to hear from you. I'd love to get some feedback. So if you liked this video, please push that like button. I'd love to hear anything you're learning, any questions you may have. And if you think you found the answers or would like to dialogue about any of the questions that I've posed on my videos, please dialogue with me on my Facebook page. All the links will be in the description. I will also be posting videos so that you can go back to any videos and find them easily on my website called www.chasingthegoal.com. I'd love to hear back from you. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next week.